Yeah, absolutely. I'll get right to it. I guess the first question: can you tell me a bit about what Wild Harvest is all about?
Oh, okay. Well, in many ways, it's all about one of probably my most favorite aspects of survival that I've ever really enjoyed or experienced. When I first started, I mean, I loved all the other skills and shelter building and fire starting and tanning hides and trapping and all these different things. But it was edible wild plants that I really enjoyed a lot. It just always, I don't know, I just had an affinity for it. And so, to make a long story short, it's a brand new series focused on local foraging, all kinds of local foraging, whether you go far and remote on the top of a mountain to gather something that's in abundance, or you're picking dandelions in your backyard and everything in between. And then it's not a survival based situation. What I do is I show you how to do all of this local foraging. That's the first half of the show. And then the second half of the show, I bring one or two or three or five edible plants into the kitchen. And Chef Paul Rogalski from Calgary, Alberta, from Rouge Restaurant, he then turns them into a masterpiece. He's a five-star chef, and he just kills it. So it's a very beautiful, sort of gentle show. Hopefully, along the lines of everything that I try to do, which is connecting people to nature. In fact, I was going to go have a shower before this interview. I'm all scratched up because I just finished gathering a big thing of Oregon grapes for one of the episodes.
Do you feel like people need to learn more about the plants that are around them and have more of that connection with nature by actually going out and getting plants, in the wilderness, obviously safe plants and everything, to use in cooking and just to understand more about the nature around them?
Well, I think they need to do all of the things that are possible to get them connected to nature. And gathering wild edible plants, local foraging, and learning how to work with them and use them safely is one aspect. Other people get into survival or fishing, or backpacking, or sea kayaking. So to me, or the subject of Bigfoot. I mean, to me, it's just what gets you out into nature.
Mhm.
And so, short answer is yes, I absolutely do think that this is a great way for people to connect to nature.
And how did the idea for Wild Harvest come about?
Well, it was really just a bit of a just a sort of a goofy conversation when Chef Paul Rogalski and I met in Mexico, and then we didn't talk again for quite a few years, off and on, maybe on email or something like that. And then about 6 years later or so, we bumped into each other in an airport of all places, and we sat down, had a beer, and started talking. So, we really should do something together, a show together, and it was really all born out of that. Just Paul and I having a beer and saying, "Why don't I go out and gather wild edibles, and you take care of them in the kitchen?" That's it.
Is there a favorite dish that you have that you make from edibles?
Well, I myself am no chef. Um, so, a lot of my stuff is confined to making jams and jellies and flours and things like that, because that's what I have sort of time to do. When Paul and I are working on the show with Kevin Kosowin, the third partner in this, we can't always be in the right place in the right time to gather the right edible when it's ripe. So I end up having a lot of fun, doing stuff that requires processing. So later on in the episode, I can bring and say something to Paul and say, here's some jam I made out of Oregon grapes, and it's from Les's pantry. Um, and then, but as far as going beyond that, I don't know. I don't know if I have a favorite. I actually like always things in my life. I like variety, so I like switching from one thing to the other.
For people, most Canadians, do you feel like they're pretty close to being able to just go out and find these kinds of the berries, things like that, to add to their dishes, even if they live in the city, just maybe an hour outside the city, kind of go out to nature and see what you find?
No, not an hour outside the city at all. Are they close? No, they're close in their backyard.
Mhm.
You can live in a condo and apartment and walk down the street to the park. You want to be able to gather in places that are safe, that the plants are not going to be sprayed with pesticides or peed on by dogs, that's legal and allowable. But those places exist even in the cities. There are a lot of back lots, and people would call them sort of waste fields. Well, we actually focused a show recently, and I really wanted to do this, so we're going to keep doing it, on gathering wild edibles right in the heart of a city. And we went
Nice.
behind a, what was it? I think it was a Lowe's, store. And there was just a field back there, got permission to go back there by the manager, went back, found far more wild edible plants that we could ever use in the show that we were planning on shooting. So we shot a show based on wild, what was it? Based on horseradish, which is an escaped domestic brought over from Europe. And I think the other one that we put in there was tall hedge mustard. Do I think they're close? I think it's in their backyard. Dandelions.
Oh, absolutely. Dandelion tea. Absolutely. That's actually pretty good. Um, I guess for people who, is this a relatively easy skill, would you say, or does it take time to kind of learn what you can eat, what you can't eat? And then once you have learned, is it a very useful skill to have in your life to be able to know these things?
The beginning stages are quite easy because you end up learning just those first half a dozen or 9 or 10 plants that are really easy to recognize, that you will always see them, that you've been assured that they're safe. And that's a key thing here as far as recognizing plants and how easy it is. Well, you can read the books, you can go online, but there is absolutely, and you can watch my shows. But
Hmm.
there is, from Survivorman to Wild Harvest, but there is zero substitute for going out with a proper teacher, someone who knows what they're doing and can say, yes, this is absolutely that that kind of plant that's edible, and it's not this other kind of plant that looks like it but is poisonous. And you need that. But it's the next stage, the advanced stage, that's not so easy, but that's all about your passion at that point. But you can go very, very far very easily, for sure.
For those who kind of were first introduced to you in Survivor Man, um, are there aspects of that show that play into Wild Harvest?
I think so. Yeah, I think how you travel when you do go further afield, if you're going to go into more remote wilderness or outside the city type thing, how you are out there, the safety measures you take, that definitely the skills of survival and what was taught on Survivor Man come into play. The plants for Survivor Man were largely based on survival, so it's a lot of pick and grab and what can you eat now. That's what I love about so much about Wild Harvest is now it's not about just anything to put sustenance in your belly. Now it's about how can I make this delicious,
Hmm.
and nothing's off the table. You can use ingredients from the kitchen and domestic ingredients. Paul uses whatever he wants. So there's definitely a connection, but it's not a survival based show.
For you, is there a satisfaction to be able to go out and find these foods that you can use in your daily diet?
Yeah, there really is. It slows you down. I'm in a really good place of life right now where I really just cherry pick and work on the projects that I want to. And so going out and doing this for your normal life, it just kind of, if there's nothing else you do and you can't organize the big backpacking or hiking trip or canoe trip, and just go out into this place and pick some dandelion and read up on how to eat dandelion and make some dandelion fritters or a spring tonic dandelion salad or roast the roots for dandelion coffee. So yeah, it's just that kind of thing that in life it is another small way of connecting you to nature that is simple and easy and right outside your door.
And what would be the best piece of advice you'd give to somebody who's interested in learning more about uh, what they can harvest in the wild?
Oh, we'll watch Wild Harvest, of
Yeah,
course.
exactly. Yeah.
So the first piece of advice is go on my YouTube channel, Survivorman Stroud. I'm always very active there, and I'm putting everything up there, so you can get lots of tips there, and lots of shows are going up there. And then, but the thing about it is there are always courses somewhere, and the people who
Mhm.
teach these courses are usually really passionate about it, and it's the kind of thing you don't make any money at. So they're not out there because they're turning a profit. They're out there because they love teaching about wild edible plants. So take a course is a big thing, right in the heart of Toronto, right in the heart of New York City, right outside of Calgary or outside of somewhere in Wisconsin. It doesn't matter. There are courses everywhere. I'm not all that strong on my mushrooms here on the West Coast where I am right now. So I'm going to be taking some West Coast mushroom courses. And it's really a wonderful thing to do. You meet up with people who like what you like, and you learn so much so quickly that way.
Do you feel like because we can just go to Safeway or IJ and just get the food we need, there is a disconnect that we have from nature, from where we're getting our foods, and is that something you're trying to remedy with Wild Harvest?
Yes and yes. I think there's a horrible disconnect. I think my whole mission in life has been about trying to reconnect. And but with when the cynical stripe in me comes out, if I walk into a department store, grocery store, or something, then I can, I can kind of smell the disconnect all around me, and these people wouldn't, know a dandelion, or between a dandelion, the difference between a dandelion and fireweed,
Mhm.
uh, and it's really disappointing to me. So, I think it's almost like a state. It's a comment on society, really. This disconnect to nature is to me and my personality is, quite frankly, not to be overly dramatic, but horrifying. I
Mhm.
wish people were more connected to nature, even in the simplest, smallest ways. And it's why I try to eradicate the word weed out of people's vocabulary, because there is actually no such species as a weed. All right, everybody's going, what's he talking? This guy's crazy. Of course, there's no. Weed is a description. Weed is a plant that grows aggressively that you don't want. If you don't want those roses and you're going to pull them out, they are by any other name. A rose is a rose by any other name. Well, it's a weed at that moment.
Mhm.
See, that's why we use it as a verb. We want to weed things out. And so one of my goals, even 30 years ago when I was teaching wild edible plant courses, was to say, you should hopefully no longer use the word weed, because what you have are wildflowers, shrubs, and vines. Whether or not you want them there, that's your personal choice. Rip them out if you don't like them in your yard. But uh, they're not weeds by species. They are
Mhm.
wildflowers, and many of them are delicious.
Do you find that's especially with something like dandelions, which have a lot of health benefits, but especially in the city, it's, we always talk about the war on dandelions and getting rid of dandelions and getting them off our lawns. But is that a good example of what you'd say how people classify weeds, where it's actually beneficial in many ways?
Yeah, that I think it's the quintessential example.
Hmm.
I'd like to get rid of lawns. I think I'll give my spiel right here for you now. I mean, if you really look at a lawn. Okay, let's say you have a lawn. All right, fair enough. No problems. I'm down with that. What are the reasons for your lawn? Do you have toddlers that play out on it? Do teenagers throw frisbees on it? Do you have garden parties out there? If all those reasons are there, okay, fine, great.
Hmm.
Set up your yard the way you wish if you have a yard, and the lawn, or in the park for throwing the football around. Excellent. But a lot of people, the majority, probably 80% of people, have lawns they never ever use. And what they end up being are big, square, green, sterile, flat areas. They're no more fertile than concrete. And so to me, I would like to eradicate lawns. Lawns are the greatest use of crop water in North America, I think possibly the world. Nothing requires more water that we grow on this planet, certainly in North America, than lawns. And so I was that guy in the city who let his lawn grow, and the neighbors would give me dirty looks and they think it was unkept. What was I seeing? I was seeing chicory and dandelion and fireweed and all kinds of flowers and mints and all sorts of things that I would harvest and grow. Oh, but what about rats and mice and stuff like that? You think they're not there anyway? They're there
Yeah.
anyway. And so for me, I would love to eradicate lawns and get people to understand that those dandelions are harvestable and delicious, as are so many others. And I'll leave you with this story. I rented a place once where they kind of mandated, we want you to, there's a lawnmower there. We want you to have the backyard lawn, backyard cut, yada, yada. Well, I actually, didn't visit that often, so I let it grow. And they came in one day and they looked and they said, oh my gosh, that is so beautiful. When did you plant all those flowers? And I just said, I didn't plant anything. I just didn't cut it.
Mhm.
And it was just covered in this wonderful plethora of wildflowers. So there's my rant. There's my spiel. If you have a lawn at home, look at it as a wonderful empty palette where you could, the first thing you do, just let it grow. Let's see what's there first.
Mhm.
And that comes up, oh, well, there's this big patch of star thistle and they're painful and yeah. Okay, all right, well, then let's work to remove the star thistle, but what can you put there and let grow, And, listen, I'm okay for domestic flowers too. When I walk in the city of Toronto, around that Dunlop, not Dunlop, what's that area? Yeah, anyway, maybe Dunlop. and I see some of the lawns that are completely covered in domestic flowers, I smile. You know, the butterflies and birds and the hummingbirds, they're all there. And then you
Mhm.
walk right beside it, and there's a big square piece of green doing nothing, sucking up
Mhm.
water. There's my rant.
How can we, along with watching Wild Harvest, how can we begin to change our view of quote unquote weeds, and what can like cities and communities do to help change that view?
Well, rewilding is an easy, nice, quaint term, but I love it because I think that's a big thing. Look, I have a yard out to my right shoulder right now. It's about an acre and a half that we've been working on. I have not been rewilding it, but I've been planting. Now that I've come around to where I've got things growing, some trees, I kind of regret the way I did it because in many ways I didn't rewild based on this climate. I brought in trees that I have to water and take care of and
Mhm.
suck water out of the ground. I'm just as abusive now of this water ground table as anybody else, unfortunately. So I'm looking and going, well, how can I change that? How can I rewild?
Mhm.
So right now it's just encouraging some more Oregon grape by pruning back some of the butterfly bush, which butterfly bush is an invasive species here. So we learn what, first of all, what is invasive and problematic. It's good to learn that. It's really easy to do that. You know, we have Google, we have the god of
Mhm.
Google to find everything out these days. What's invasive in Ontario? Oh, wow. I didn't know these purple loosestrife. My grandmother just planted in her yard are actually, taking out the cattail swamps.
Mhm.
Okay. So you learn that. You become unqueasy about doing it. Just let that lawn grow and see, make it an experiment. And then here's what I do. I let a lawn grow and then I cut a pathway through it, a winding, swooping trail all the way through it. So I cut so that I can walk through it and enjoy and figure out what's growing there. And, I likened it one time. I was actually talking to my wife and I said, because I was convincing her about how to let our lawn grow and figure out what's there. I said, look at it this way. If a woman wants to grow her hair out, she knows she's going to be pinning it up for about 10 months. That's what a woman would call, oh, it's the ugly phase. I'm trying to get my hair long, but I'm in the ugly phase right now. So I'm going to pin it up. And then all of a sudden, after about 12 or 13 months, they let their hair down. They go, I'm looking pretty good. This is pretty nice. Next time I go out for dinner, I'm letting my hair's going to be long. A lawn is just like that. You have
Mhm.
to go through about, I would estimate about 1 to 2, sometimes 3 um, years where you just let it get kind of ugly before you find all the beauty within it. That's a technique that I use that I think people could start to have fun with.
When you're out and about, do you have a lot of people who stop you and either ask you questions about, wild harvest, things like that, or survival tips? Like, do you find like people are asking you things like that when you're kind of just out in your day to day life?
No, I think they get too nervous to ask too much about that stuff. I get a lot of those questions online. I mean, thousands of them. If I bump into somebody out there, I generally get, hey man, I really love your show, and I grew up now I'm found because I'm getting older. I grew up watching your show, and this is like someone who's 26 telling me this, um, so I get appreciation. So I'm grateful I'm not a politician because nobody throws tomatoes at me or yells at me or is mad at me. I get a lot of appreciation, and that's always a wonderful thing. And I was
Mhm.
glad to hear just the other day, Chef Paul Rogalski was telling me, and this is a first for him. He got stopped twice in the same block by somebody who's been watching Wild Harvest to tell them how much they like the show. So I'm really glad for Paul that that's happening, getting some notoriety he deserves because his work on Wild Harvest is unbelievable. I mean, every dish is just, it sounds cliche, but it's mouth-watering
Mhm.
and sumptuous to look at. So, and Kevin Kosselin, who's our third partner in this, there's nobody that, as we call it, shoots food porn like Kevin does. So,
And then just the last question: if people want to watch Wild Harvest, if they want to learn more about it, you mentioned your website. If they want to follow you on social media, what do they do? Did I cut out there?
okay. Yeah. Well, first of all, if you're in the United States, it's airing on 98% of public broadcasting stations. So the PBS stations, as presented by American Public Television. So they just check their local listings. But also you can go online. And so Survivorman Stroud is my YouTube channel. And I put my entire catalog up there, plus all the new shows. Every Friday, there's more shows going up. In fact, right now, every Friday is a new Wild Harvest. And they can go on there and watch. So just go YouTube, Survivorman Stroud, and you'll find that channel immediately. And when people want to connect with me on Instagram and Facebook, that is me that answers. I don't have an office or staff or
Mhm.
anybody doing that. Maybe years ago when Survivorman was riding high and I was really busy traveling around the world. But these days it's just me. So
Mhm.
I would suggest the best is to, and absolutely, and now I'm going to sound like I'm hawking something, but subscribe to the channel. Those
Mhm.
numbers make a difference. They enable me to continue to bring stuff out onto the channel. So if they go on and they find me online and they go to the YouTube channel, click the subscribe button. It costs nothing. And every time I put up a Wild Harvest show, they'll get a little notice.